Okay, so we're going to do something that you may not know how to do, which is to varnish a painting, but it's actually really pretty easy. So I don't want you to get confused or dismayed thinking that this is something really complicated. But the first thing that I want to say about varnishing a painting is wait and give it some time before you go to varnish it. You do not want to varnish a wet painting. As a matter of fact, it's recommended that if you're varnishing an oil painting, that you wait a year, at least 6 months before you varnish it. So the odds are you will already have it framed and probably up on the wall somewhere. So this is going to be the disappointing part. You've already done all of that work. You're going to have to redo it because you're going to want to take it down off the wall and you're going to want to get it out of the frame because you don't want to end up getting like varnish dripping on your frame or something like that. So we're going to take this back out of the frame. This work. I'm just going to have it sped up. Doesn't matter if you have nothing to do with it. Start doing the light. Yeah, I like seeing it super fast. You're always looking like a anyway. It's right. Okay, great. Okay, so we've got it out of the frame. We're ready to do some varnishing. There are different kinds of varnish and different brands of varnish. One of the varnishes that has been traditionally used for a long time is a liquid varnish that you're going to brush onto your canvas. I like this Damar varnish. It's by Winsor & Newton. Great varnish. The problem is with varnishing with a brush is every time that a little hair might fall out of your brush, it'll get caught on your canvas and then you have to go in and pick it out of that sticky varnish. So I've just learned over time that even though it lays a really nice coat of varnish to do it this way, that I just prefer to use a spray varnish. And so this Liquitex matte varnish is what I tend to use most because for the most part, I don't want a real glossy looking, finish to my paintings. I think it actually takes away from the look of the painting itself if you're standing over to the side and there's some light coming in from the side, it will just kind of wash out all of your color. So I don't tend to like to use a gloss varnish, but I'm going to tell you, here's a little trick that I want to add into this, is that if you varnish your painting everywhere, now this has to do with like a water scene. So we have in this painting with the waterfall, we have this sheen that is in the pool of water. If you use matte varnish all out and around this outside edge, but if you use a gloss varnish, and I like this gloss, this is a Grumbacher Damar varnish again, and it is a gloss varnish. If you use that in the area where you have the sheen on the water, it just kind of enhances that sheen a little bit. So we're going to take this outside because that's one thing that I want to suggest if you're going to use particularly a spray varnish, that you get outdoors or in a very well ventilated area. So let's take this outside. We'll put it on my easel and we'll do a little spraying outdoors. Okay. So we're outside here in the open air. We're going to start with this matte varnish. And when you're applying the varnish, what you want to do is find a good distance. Now, depending on how much air is moving, if it's really wind blowing strong, you probably can't even do it on a day like that because it'll just carry the varnish away and you'll find yourself getting closer and closer to the canvas, and you're running the risk of having runs or having big areas that are too thick. So you want to just lay on a nice even thin coat. If you have to, you can go back and do additional coats. So what I suggest is about 1 foot from the canvas is a good place to start. You may get in as close as maybe 8 inches, something like that. So let's just begin applying it. And you can see we're just kind of misting the varnish on. And you can see we have quite a bit of wind today, so I'm having to get in relatively close to be able to get it to attach, but not so close that it's pulling up, not so close that I'm going to cause any kind of runs. Okay, and I got all around in this outside area here, and then as we were talking about before, make sure you shake the varnish up really good before you get started. But as we were talking about before, in this area where there's a sheen on the water, we're going to do this little trick. We're going to do this little trick where we're putting the gloss varnish in the areas where we want the sheen to be. Now what you're going to want to do is leave it sit for about 1 to 3 hours. Let it get good and thoroughly dry. It's nice to let it get thoroughly dry outdoors instead of bringing it indoors, because even though you're not spraying indoors at this point, the smell will really smell up a room pretty good. So we'll leave it out here in the air. We'll come back later, see if it's good and dry, and if it is, we'll kind of evaluate. Do we feel like we got a nice, consistently smooth, even coat over the entire painting? If so, great, we can move on. If not, we can put a second coat or even a third coat to get it to the point where we feel comfortable and feel like it's really actually sealed the whole painting. One thing you'll notice also that is a great thing about varnishing your paintings is the colors get enriched again, enlivened again, because after a painting sits, particularly acrylic paintings, after they sit for some time, lots of times they'll get a little bit more dull. Some of the colors will recede a little bit so that they're not quite as sharp and evident as they were when you first painted them. And when you put a coat of varnish on, sometimes it just brings that rich color back and makes it really beautiful. So we'll check on this a little bit later. Varnishing, it's really not that hard, right? Okay, thanks.